Hello, and welcome to the virtual convening series hosted by the Sorenson Impact Institute. We're excited to have you join us today as we learn more about the next generation of changemakers and the programs that intersect students and societal impact. My name is Chad Salvador, CFO and Director of Student Programs at the Sorenson Impact Institute. The Institute's mission is to expand the market for impact investing and equip the next generation of impact leaders, forging a future where impact is seamlessly integrated across sectors worldwide. We are proudly housed at the University of Utah's David Eccles School of Business, where we also help train future leaders in impact. We are also thrilled to announce the opening of our new building, the Impact and Prosperity Epicenter, a living learning community dedicated to inspiring students to become change makers. The Epicenter, as we call it, is home to over 700 University of Utah residents living in a shared community designed to bring together students and professionals with that shared passion of the betterment of people and the planet. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by a wonderful panel of speakers. First is Amelia Angela, Director at the Social Enterprise Initiative at Harvard Business School. Andrew Byros, Senior Director at the Center for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the University of San Diego. And Allison Boxer, Managing Director at the Sorenson Impact Institute and Associate Professor and James Lee Sorenson Presidential Endowed Chair of Applied Research at the University of Utah David Eccles School of Business. So welcome to everyone. To start us off, I would love for each of you to quickly give an overview of yourself and what your university offers in terms of impact. Amelia, let's start with you.
Thank you, Chad. Well, thank you for having me with you here today. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm Amelia Angela. I'm Director of the Social Enterprise Initiative at Harvard Business School. We call ourselves SEI, and I'm particularly thrilled to be here because I came to HBS as a student in 1999 because of SEI. I had come in with a solely nonprofit background, which was quite unusual at the time. I'm happy to say less so now, but happy to be here to talk more about the impact that we have had on my life, but also on our students today. So SEI was founded in 1993, so over 30 years ago, as one of the first centers at a business school focused on social impact. And since that time, obviously, our staff has grown, our programming's grown. We've often opened new centers at HBS on healthcare and business and environment, as well as race, gender, and equity. And we all work together to provide community and content to our students, as well as alumni and practitioners who come back to campus for our executive education programs. And then, of course, to be a home for our faculty who are working on these topics. And I just also wanted to say we've always had a big tent approach to social enterprise. So we are agnostic to legal status. We embrace everything from 501c3s to fully for-profit enterprises. But that is the Social Enterprise Initiative at HBS. So thank you.
Wonderful, Andrew.
I love that Big Ten approach. Hi, I'm Andrew Byros. Good to be with y'all and everyone who we can't see on screen yet. I get to serve as the Senior Director at the Center for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at the University of San Diego. Our center is housed within the Provost's office, and really our goal and mission is to make good on our new strategic vision and to help connect and knit all of the impact and change-making work that's happening across our 7 schools. My background is in innovative teaching and learning. So I started as a community organizer in West Philadelphia. I was a teacher, was a school leader, started schools, helped schools redesign. I really care deeply about how do we prepare the next generation of learners. And when I say we, I mean we as educators. And working in higher ed now, there are a lot of headwinds that we face, and I sincerely believe that impact-focused work is going to be our future. At our center, we have a climate resiliency hub that works across the region here, a small business development center. We organize a global social innovation business plan competition for students around the world, college and university students. We have a dynamic teaching case series on social impact that is written and developed by our faculty, trying to make real what impact work looks like for students. Looking forward to learning a lot and hopefully sharing a little bit more about our work and finding ways to invite folks into it.
Fantastic. And now Allison.
Hi, it's great to be here with such esteemed colleagues, Amelia and Andrew. I am Allison Boxer. As Chad mentioned, I hold a number of different hats here at the University of Utah at the David Eccles School of Business. I am the Managing Director of Impact Academics at the Sorenson Impact Institute. I'm also on faculty in the Department of Entrepreneurship and Strategy, where I teach social impact courses, social impact strategy, social entrepreneurship, and developing other courses on impact investing and some others, and as well as the James Lee Sorenson Presidential Endowed Chair for Applied Research, specifically in impact, that allows me to do all of this fantastic work. And Chad already gave a bunch of background information on the Sorenson Impact Institute, so I'll just target it by saying that we have really three different approaches to how we engage students in our work. One is the Epicenter, as Chad mentioned, our brand new Live Learn community that houses over 700 students who live in the building, as well as our offices, and really for the first of its kind. We also have a number of internships across the work that we do: impact investing, impact finance, impact strategy, really to as an apprenticeship model for students and training the next generation of impact leaders. And then the third is really the academic side of things, which is the side that we're growing the most right now, and really connecting classroom to career is the way I like to think about it.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And I can tell we're going to be set up for a great conversation today. And to get us started, let's just start with the question of, why is it essential to teach impact-focused courses at business schools and universities? And I would love to hear from all three of you, but Amelia, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I love this question, and I'm so glad to be able to kick it off. So our mission at HBS is to educate leaders who make a difference in the world. So it really is, social impact really is embedded in the mission, and we really find it to be a core element of the effective education and preparation of our future leaders, business leaders, and really a core part of what we think every modern leader needs for their toolkit. So all of our students receive a general management MBA degree. There is no focus in social impact in terms of a certificate or anything like that. But again, we do consider it to be a critical part of their education. So every first-year student is required to take courses that involve social impact, one being leadership and corporate accountability, and the other being a new module that I'm really excited to talk about, which is a 4-day module that every first-year student has to take, called The Purpose of the Firm. And this is relatively new. It's in the past 4 years. So Allison and I didn't have the benefit of taking it, but it's really designed to have all of our students explore how and under what circumstances private firms can help address social problems. And so this is a really exciting new addition to our required curriculum, where students really pick apart what it takes to make a difference in the world, what resources they need, what coalitions they need to build, et cetera. And then in addition to that, we have 18 courses in our second year that are under that big tent of social impact. So we really have a lot of opportunities for our students to engage. I have always found that social impact leaders are some of the most dynamic leaders that I've ever interacted with. And so I'm really excited to see how their skills are being integrated into what I consider to be modern leadership. And we have a faculty member, Dutch Leonard, who talks about this quite a bit. And one of the things we talk about is how leadership has evolved. So if you looked back at our cases at HBS 50 years ago, a lot of them were kind of command and control scenarios, right? So what we think of like in a mental model of a typical leader, that mental model of a leader has shifted quite a bit, I would say, in the modern day. And those skills that social impact leaders have innately or that they've had to build over time, skills like empathy, like listening, like building resilience, turning down the temperature, right? Like these are skills that social impact leaders use every day that are increasingly very, very core to any Fortune 500 CEO, much less a social impact leader. So I really, you can tell I'm passionate about this. I feel like this is our moment. Like we have a lot to learn from social impact leaders that we can bring to all aspects of business. Again, like how do you build coalitions? How do you get people to go along with you when they may not agree with the direction, right? How do you lead when you may not be getting all of the credit publicly? So again, like I just feel like this toolkit is so important to the current generation of business school students, and think that social enterprise has a lot to bring to that.
Wow. Yes to all of that. Holy cow. I want to see this, the purpose of the firm. That sounds brilliant. I found that, so I started here at USD at our Graduate School of Peace Studies, the only graduate school of peace studies in the country, and we have a master's in social innovation. And so a lot of students would come to us, and even with like pitch competitions, they come and say, I want to address this big issue. And here's how I'm going to do it. Here's my great idea. And I say, great. Okay, how are you going to fund it? And they say, we're going to fundraise and apply for grants. And then I look at them and say, no, you're not. I work in a nonprofit, and let me tell you how hard it is. And then we start the work of, understanding how to develop a social enterprise, how to create a business model canvas, a social impact or enterprise model canvas. And really trying to help students see that you can do some good in the world and realize economic security with your firm. And I really believe that that's our goal, or that's the mission of higher education. It's it's an engine for social mobility, and students are coming to us. They have all the information, like more information than we were ever prepared for about all the things that are wrong in the world. And certainly there are many of them. And they're saying, I want to do something about this. Folks, young folks have always had that mindset. And it's our job to say, here's how you do it. Here are the skills and mindsets and examples. And so, Chad, to your question, why should we do this work? Because our world needs more of it. And, why else are we here if not to prepare the next generation of folks, of leaders, to make sure that some of these challenges that we face now, that are some of the same challenges that we faced for a while, and certainly some more that are going to come online soon, not to use that technological parlance. How do we help them get ready for it? Because otherwise, we're not in a good spot societally.
Yeah, I want to also build on what Amelia said. I like how you talked about the changing how we think about business and what leadership needs as business itself evolves. And I always tell my students that the goal is to change the way they think about the role of business in the world, so that business is a force that is shaping our world, whether we like it or not. So how will we use it? And regardless of what career path they choose, my goal is that they go into their future roles with a lens toward creating the world they want to live in. And by integrating impact thinking into business education, we ensure that the future leaders of businesses prioritize long-term value creation rather than short-term gains. And I think that's really the key shift. And I think that often anyone thinking about impact in business can go through a learning curve that starts with maybe risk mitigation, which is really important, whether we're thinking about the environment or social aspects or whatever it is. Often we start thinking about the social because we're trying to mitigate the risks that come along with it. And then that often is a foot in the door that then leads to strategy and innovation. But it's that changing of mindset of what is the role of business in the world and how do we create long-term value creation.
I love that. I love that. And this next question I wanted to ask is really an extension of that. And you all touched on this to some degree, but I want to go a little bit deeper. Where if we think about, expanding learning, it's so critical, especially in the current environment of higher education. And so would love to hear all of your thoughts on, what skills and mindsets student gain from impact focused education that they might not get from traditional curriculum. Andrew, let's have you start on this one.
Oh man. Okay. So if you have not already, you definitely need to go read Dario Amadei's essay, Machines. What was it? I have it right here. Machines of Tender Loving Care. I was reading it. Machines of Loving Grace. That's it. I was reading it again yesterday. And the reason I recommend that is because I think it's a really simple prediction about the impact that artificial intelligence is going to have on our society in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, why do I start there with this question, Chad? It's because as educators and in higher ed, we really need to start asking the question, what can we offer students that they can't get from a machine, or they can't get from the machines that are going to be around in 5 or 10 years? And this, I believe, it is the development of metacognitive skills. It's the ability to come and be in a place with others and to try and to fail and to get feedback and learn how to communicate intrapersonally, developing an internal locus of control. It's that like fail and like, oh, I know that I can do this, so I will try again. It's simple stuff like being able to clearly explicate your views one-on-one, because a chatbot will likely do that for us, when we're just sending emails. That developing those skills, impact work lends itself to it brilliantly. Everything for all the reasons Amelia, talked about at the top.
Yeah.
These are the things that coalition building is a skill, a metacognitive skill that requires deep listening to other people, putting aside your ego, changing your mind. And I really believe that higher ed and impact-focused work provides the training ground for folks to learn and develop those skills.
I love that. Allison or Amelia, anything to add?
Yeah,
I'll add briefly. Go ahead, Amelia.
no, you go, and then I'll go. Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to say that Amelia touched on so many of them initially in your first answer. I think one of the key things is the ability to hold in their grasp the perspectives of a variety of stakeholders and to weave those perspectives together and be able to optimize value across stakeholders rather than maybe maximizing for one stakeholder, which goes back to so many of the different aspects that Amelia mentioned earlier, like de-escalating and stakeholder engagement, bringing people along with a vision, all of those different things. I think that's really key. Amelia, go ahead.
Yeah, I talk about this a little bit. We have a kickoff for our students at the beginning of the year that's like very career focused. And when I first started in this role, I felt really uncomfortable giving the world needs you speech, even though, of course, the world does need these students, but they know that, right? So it's like, beyond that, why is this a really attractive career path for an MBA student who has the world in front of them? And I really reflected on my career in social impact. And, one of the reflections I had was like really interesting problems, right? Like really complex problems that you might not find if you're a product manager of a pet food company. Again, like no shade on that, but what gets you excited and the intellectual exercise of diving into complex problems, like we said, with multiple stakeholders without clear answers. I find that to be a really rewarding way to spend my career. So I think that's a skill that you might not get in the traditional curriculum. I think systems thinking, that's something we're talking a lot about at HBS right now in terms of social enterprise, but really it's not just social enterprise. It's really how the world works right now. There are not a lot of areas that you can operate independently, right, without being part of a larger system. And what does leadership in that context look like? I think is kind of the future of leadership education. Impact measurement is another huge one, right? Where, and again, it's not just around what outcomes are you looking for, but what are the unintended consequences of the work that you're doing? And boy, business could use a lot more reflection on that, right? So, yeah, I think there's a lot there, a lot of richness that can be brought into the traditional curriculum from social impact.
Yeah, certainly agree with all of that. And the career piece is a very big component of it, and one that we'll touch on here in just a couple of minutes. But before we go there, I want to touch on this one, where if you think about those of us on this call, we have representatives from all over the country and from different types of institutions, which is powerful evidence that this type of work can be implemented anywhere. But that certainly doesn't mean that it's easy to do. And so what I'd love to hear from you is, what are some of the biggest barriers you've encountered to implementing impact-focused education into the broader curriculum, and how have you been able to overcome them? And Allison, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. Well, I think for us, and in my role, the biggest challenge has been simply getting started. The Sorenson Impact Institute itself has been operating for many years, but we didn't really have any academic ties. And similarly to Amelia, I went to Harvard Business School over a dozen years ago now, specifically for the Social Enterprise Initiative, and was very involved in the Social Enterprise Initiative and the conference there, and was also in the pilot semester for a number of social impact related courses. Now, Amelia mentioned they have so many, and I was, in the first of a number of those. It was really an exciting time. And when I came to the University of Utah about 10 years after I graduated from HBS, like I said, we had this amazing institute, but we really had no academics. And so I think the key to, and so getting started is the key, is the first barrier. But really the key to addressing this barrier is advocates. I mean, we are so lucky. We have fantastic university and business school leadership, and a strong local advocate, of course, in Jim Sorenson and the name. So we were able to get things off the ground, and we're at a point now. It wasn't the case when I first arrived, but we're at the point now where the new relatively new president of the University of Utah overall, President Taylor Randall, has set a vision of becoming a top 10 public university with unsurpassed societal impact, which I just think is really incredible. And I'm actually currently working on our business school strategy with the dean of the business school, and I can tell you that one of our key priorities is creating societal impact as well. And so I just think that shift of mindset and of what we're trying to do is really the first step. A second kind of institutional barrier I think we face and is that currently impact isn't just one discipline, right? It's across all disciplines. And so we're housed, I'm housed in the Department of Entrepreneurship and Strategy within our business school, which is a great place to be because we're entrepreneurial and can build and do exciting things. But, we're also focused on impact investing quite deeply, and that might be in finance, or, impact itself is truly interdisciplinary across the entire university when you're thinking about engineering, the environment, and everything else. So, at Sorenson Impact Institute, we even have a senior fellow from the biology department, which is amazing. And so it's that kind of, universities don't always operate in that kind of interdisciplinary way. And so I think that's kind of another hurdle. And then I'd say for us, which I don't think is the case with my colleagues necessarily, but for us, it's also student time and attention. I'm not going to say it's student interest. The student, I mean, the next generation cares. We know that. And I have seen the depth of interest within students, especially those that take my class. But, when they're in school, they have have credits they have to take. They have so many things pulling their time and attention. And so I think it's get how and where they get involved and spend their time. There's only 24 hours in a day. So I'd say that's kind of the last barrier that I'd mention, but I'd love to hear what my colleagues are facing.
Oh my gosh, can I jump? I've been thinking and doing a little writing about attention, Allison. I love that you brought that up. Barriers, I'll go in reverse order from what I was going to say, just because you mentioned attention. It is mindsets. The purpose of higher ed, Wendy Fishman and Howard Gardner's recent book, Harvard colleagues, found that over 50% of incoming freshmen and graduating seniors had nearly a transactional mindset about why they were attending college, meaning the transactional in, I come to college so I can get a degree and realize economic sustainability. Okay, if that's what students are showing up with, then it's our job to make clear how they can realize that, to create paths for them to realize that, while also demonstrating that you can, you don't have to give up your soul, you can have an impact on the community you serve, on larger issues that you care about. And if we don't do that, and I don't think I'll say we are, but higher education as a sector is facing a lot of challenges because we've lost the sight of the ball a little bit on that charge. The other barriers, resources. So this is why we created a teaching case series, usdteachingcases.org. We're an official partner collection with Harvard Business Publishing Education. And they're teaching cases for folks about what happens when you fight for justice and you lose. So it's a teaching case about a policy advocate working on behalf of survivors of human trafficking who put together a statewide coalition. And at the last minute, the 3 sentences were added to the bill, and pretty much everything they were fighting for was stripped. So what does she do as a social entrepreneur? One of the core learning outcomes is is this person a social entrepreneur? Students often say yes. What's the role of social enterprise in a humanitarian disaster? There's a teaching case about a social enterprise incubator in Lebanon after the Beirut explosion. We need to create materials that make real for students what this world looks like and what social innovators and entrepreneurs grapple with, so that it's not, just pie in the sky, magical thinking about how to make the world a better place. You actually have to think about budgets and people and dealing with policymakers sometimes, most of the time. And then partnerships. I think sometimes on the ivory tower, maybe we don't want to get off and go establish partnerships with community stakeholders. That this is more tipping my hat to how you do this work. Go find the trade organization in your community that is super psyched about helping you develop an internship program, or wants to, the organization that really wants to develop their people. And the way that they do that is their folks come in and design 20-minute quick lessons for your students, and so they're developing some skills of their own. That's if you're not doing that, then you're going to have a hard time making impact work real in just 4 walls.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, a few tactical things that make it difficult. It's a 2-year program. The first year is required, and there's a lot we're trying to teach them, right, in a short period of time. So there's just only so many classes. So that just the nature of the program can be restrictive. Harvard Business School primarily teaches via the case method. The case method is not always the best method to talk about complex social problems, right? It tends to be oriented around a specific problem with a specific organization. So it can be hard to talk about nuance in cases. We're getting better at it, and we're writing cases with an eye towards that. But as a method of teaching, it can be difficult to get some of the social impact, themes across. Another thing, this is a little more nuanced, but our cases are specifically designed so that people can come with different perspectives and they're all reasonable, right? That can be difficult in a social impact context, right? Sometimes the students want what is the right answer here? And that is specifically what we try not to do at HBS. We're trying to teach them not what to think, but kind of how to think, how to approach a problem. But that there can be tension there with social impact cases. I definitely agree with the time and attention. And then for us, I mean, ironically, having been around now for 30 years, it's kind of maintaining the urgency, right? So there's all sorts of new centers now. We're the old guard. So there's digital technology transformation, there's AI, there's climate tech, right? There's biotech, like there's all sorts of new shiny things on the block. So part of it is the partnership and staying relevant in that context. But we've been around a long time now, and so there's pros and cons to that. Yeah.
It's so hard to stay relevant. This next one is something that has come up a little bit, but I want to go into it a little bit deeper around the concept of value creation. Because I think that many of us may still face the perceptions that impact must come with some sort of concession. And Amelia, I know that at the Social Enterprise Initiative, you really emphasize the importance of striving to create value. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what is your sense of that value creation in both an organizational and educational sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, so I would just say plainly, we really are very explicit with our students that we don't necessarily consider that trade-off to be, a necessary one, but also acknowledge it does exist, right? I mean, I've seen a huge shift in student perception of the field, certainly since I was a student. 85% of our entrants to our new venture competition this year were for-profit or hybrid ventures. Whereas when I was a student, I was here when the first year of the social enterprise track was founded, it was all nonprofits, right? So we're seeing a really healthy skepticism from our students around a purely philanthropic model. I mean, Andrew, you referred to that as well, right? So it's not necessarily us that's driving this conversation. The students are really seeing it. One of the big questions I get, we have a big expo at the beginning of the year, and the first year students come in and they're kind of taking it all in, and they'll come up to me and they'll say, the Social Enterprise Initiative, well, what is social impact? How do you define social impact, right? And I always feel really uncomfortable answering that question because it's so personal, right? What problem you're trying to solve, that's a personal mission for you. And I wouldn't want to be in the position of telling you, yes, that is social impact, or no, it's not. But we do talk explicitly with them around how do you put some frameworks around that. And one framework that I have found to be particularly helpful in recent years is the 5 dimensions of impact that you might be familiar with. But this is developed by a coalition of impact investors. And it really looks at, who are you trying to serve? What is the impact you're trying to have? How many people will you be serving? What's the contribution? So what are the outcomes above and beyond what might not have happened if your organization didn't exist? And then what are the risks, right? What is the risk of unintended impact? So guiding them towards that framework, but then leaving them open to really imagine what social impact looks like is really how we kind of guide our students to think about social impact. But again, I think it's a hard question to answer. But I almost think the students are answering it for us, right? They're not accepting that they have to have a concession here. They're kind of pushing the envelope on that.
Andrew, Allison, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing the same thing, and I also in my strategy class talk about how weaving impact into strategy and making it a part of how you actually make revenue and how you actually, decrease costs and how you actually make the business model work really works well for that kind of value creation conversation as well, and not framing the conversation as binary, as concessionary or non-concessionary, but framing the conversation as just a more holistic way of looking at the world. And, if we're looking at the world through a lens of, like I said at the beginning, whether it's risk mitigation and actually it's going to decrease our costs over the long term, or whether it's, a part of how we drive revenue, whether it's consumer demand or whether it's, something else, that just reframing it from that binary conversation into more of a holistic view of how impact plays into the business and value creation is how I try to think about it.
Yeah, that's so key, integrating it into the business model so that those incentives are aligned. That's critical.
Something someone smarter than me told me, which I appreciate. Certain acronyms get politically weaponized, and it's not always great to be on one's back foot as the new thing that everyone hates pops up. And so I had someone share with me, corporate sustainability. I'll just tell you what it is. Like, it's not planting trees. It's not having a corporation go out and plant trees. Like, it's not making sure that this corporation's around for the next 100 years and not 40 years. And the way that you do that is by making sure that you don't pillage, the world around you, that you have folks who are excited to work for you and with you. And I have found that someone could, that's a simple way to look at it. You could charge, but I think it's the right one. That, we want this business, this enterprise to be successful. So we got to take a long view, not just race towards the next earnings report.
Yeah, there's certainly nothing wrong with simple, especially when it's profound like that. So let's do a little bit of a shift. So far, we've been focused a little more at the institutional level, but I want to transition more to a student-centric focus. And this is a question that you've all touched on a little bit, but I would love to hear from you of to what degree are students actively seeking out those impact-focused courses, and especially what trends are you seeing now versus, a few years ago?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I, as I said, I don't know if our numbers are quite, if our demand numbers in terms of students is quite on par with institutions in other parts of the country or other types of institutions. I was visiting Columbia University just a couple of weeks ago, and their Sustainable Investing Research Initiative, which does incredible work, I think has 9 courses this semester alone, and they are just all full with demand. And I think that's incredible. While demand is growing where we are, like I said earlier, I think it's really more the depth of interest that I see. And, course evaluations coming out of impact courses say things like, every business student should take this as a fundamental course, things like that. And I think one trend I'm really seeing is, regardless of whether they have the time and attention to take the classes we're talking about, a large portion of the next generation really want to marry their values with their careers. Yeah. And that really can't be ignored. I think that's a really key thing. I will say in my classes, I have 2 kind of different types of profiles of students, those that come in because they're impact courses and they're already interested and they, want to learn about this and this is their passion. And then I have students who end up in my classes because they needed that credit. They want the entrepreneurship credit or whatever it is. I welcome them with open arms. What I hear a lot is, I just hadn't thought about it that way. Or I thought about it, or I guess it was in my head, but this really helped me put structure on how I was thinking about it, or put words into how I was thinking about it. And so I think that some of the things we've already talked about in the last question about framing it in terms of how is this good for the business, as well as good for the world, but not just doing it for good, but doing it because it's also good business, is part of what brings those students in who maybe hadn't thought about it that way before. And then I hear things in the evaluations like, this is the way business is trending and it's not taught enough, So those are some of the different things I'm seeing and hearing.
Fantastic. Andrew, it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, we launched a social innovation internship this year where students are working with purpose-driven companies hybrid here in San Diego so they can get that in-person experience. And we're paying them the equivalent of $22 an hour to work 15 hours a week. Okay, very cool. We launched this application and there was no big marketing around it. We shared it with some of our colleagues, some faculty, other centers, and just wanted students, sought students to apply. We only have 10 spots this first year. USD is a place, we have about a little over 9,000 students, and 2,000 students opened that application.
Wow.
Crazy, right? Yeah. I did not stand outside and scream at the top of my lungs. It simply ricocheted across campus because we showed students, these are the companies you're going to be working for, a sustainable grocery bag company, a B Corp that's focused on upcycling high-end fashion products. And here's the type of work that you're going to be doing, and we're going to pay you. And we had over 100 students fill out our very long, we're going to have to make it shorter, application. And we've got 10 students just rocking it, getting a great experience this spring. That level of demand makes me really excited for the future.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. We're seeing very strong interest from the students, and a couple of trends I would highlight. One is social entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship in general is a huge trend, but social entrepreneurship is just exploding and super exciting to see. Yeah. Our students who started ventures last year coming out of HBS, over a third of them self-reported that they were social impact ventures. So it's a huge part now of the entrepreneurship ecosystem at HBS, and something, frankly, that we're working really hard on a day-to-day basis to keep up with that interest and that demand, and also establishing supports for those students. We similarly have a summer internship program. We now are now in our second year of having a cohort of the summer interns who are specifically founders, right? So how do we support the founder experience in that summer? And many of them then go on and launch those ventures after graduating. So I would say entrepreneurship is one. Impact investing is another area of huge interest. We do have a relatively new field course here in our second year where students can actually due diligence and make investments in local underrepresented businesses in Boston, which is a great new experience for them to have. We have a sustainable investing class, but that continues to be a huge area of interest for our students. Ed tech and climate tech, anything really tech enabled, but specifically ed tech and climate tech are two big areas of interest as well. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing.
Well, I love to see it, and especially the optimism that you're all showing, especially given all of that interest. So we're going to pivot to some questions that have been coming in from all of you attending, so please continue to send those in. But to start with, I would love to hear from all of you of how can partnerships with business and nonprofits and government agencies as well help these programs to scale? Who wants to take the lead?
I mean, I can start. This is something we are thinking about a lot, not just at the Sorenson Impact Institute, but at the entire business school, at the David Eccles School of Business, and how we can partner with businesses and the local economy. I think going back to a number of the examples that my colleagues just mentioned, we also have an impact investing program with, funds that students work in, and the students are doing the due diligence and presenting to the investment committee. We have students working on internships with all these projects. And I think that the more experiential learning that students can be involved in, the more of this type of partnership, people who are willing to invest in these types of partnerships and have students work with them. Not only does it help the students, it also helps those businesses, because then they will have that lens and that experience when they leave school. And then it also helps the impact field overall as we think about the pipeline of impact professionals that are coming into the field.
here's what I'll say about partnerships. From my experience here, working in K-12, where we did a lot of this work, you need to scaffold what partnership looks like with businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies. And our colleagues at UT Austin with their Longhorn Impact Fellowship, I'll shout them out. I am really impressed with how they have done that for that program, and we stole a lot of what they were doing. So too the folks at Santa Clara stole. They happily gave it away.
Leveraged.
That's it. You can steal it. Anything I've shared, I'm happy to let you steal it from me. But you need to scaffold it with folks who aren't educators, don't work with students, and work in sometimes sclerotic institutions that you can't just make a decision on a dime. And so that means, so what is exactly by scaffolding? Like, it's managing expectations with potential partners. It's being very clear with students. If you're sending students into the field, like this is what is expected of you. Here are your deliverables. Hey, what's your class schedule this semester? Like, how are you balancing your academic commitments? Oh, and you're a sophomore. Like, it's a big year for you. Like, socially, like how are you going to balance? Like, having those types of conversations, I have found, is really, really important. So that when the partnership is happening, you've level set and you've built in a lot of, I just keep using the word scaffolds to make sure that when something isn't going how you envisioned it, that you can quickly intervene and set it on the right path.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've learned over the years that developing those partnerships are critical, and really kind of educating the partners, right, on how they can best work with us and our students to set both parties up for success. And often that doesn't look like business as usual for a nonprofit or a public sector entity in particular, right? So one of the things we talk to our students a lot about, but also to our partners in those sectors, is like the recruiting cycle looks very different for these partners than it does for McKinsey, who comes to campus with 50 people in October and gives offers in November, and the students are set for the next summer, right? Like, that's not how the city of Boston hires. So it's both telling the students that and saying, like, that's okay, that this is what's to be expected. And we have data behind that for our social impact students. Like, most of their offers for the summer come in April and May. That's really late. That feels stressful to them, right? When they're comparing themselves to their classmates who are all set by Christmas break or holiday break. So some of it is level setting with the students, but then it's also saying to the employers, like, can you plan a little more in advance? Can you send some people to campus? Invest a little bit in recruiting in a traditional way that a lot of these, again, institutions just aren't used to investing in recruiting in that way. So it's both ways. It's, can we help you write a job description? Can we help you understand what skills an MBA is going to bring to city government, for example? And that's not always evident, right? In fact, and there's some people that it's actually like, it's not seen as a positive, right, to have an MBA on the team. It's hugely helpful to have alumni from the school who are in that leadership, who understand what the skill set looks like. So we lean a lot on our alumni for those partnerships as well, because they understand. And, so those are just some examples of like very specific things we do to foster these partnerships, but they're really important to us to get our students out and working in the field.
I literally had a conversation with my colleague this morning about that exact topic, and excited about eventually when we'll get to that point, we can provide that level of support. So this next question comes from Tim, and I love this question because, none of us operate in, isolation. So would love to hear from everyone how intentionally sourcing and having responsible supply chains contribute to social impact. It's certainly a very big question. Who wants to take the leap and answer it first?
I mean, this is the heart of the impact strategy class that I teach, that this is how businesses that are not social impact businesses, if that's how we think about it. They don't label themselves necessarily as social impact businesses or social entrepreneurs or anything like that. But this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say reframe or rethink about the role of business in the world. And that it's not only good for the world, but it can also be, companies are choosing to do this more and more because it's good for the company as well. So having intentional sourcing and a responsible supply chain can mean things like, if you have a better partnership with your suppliers, then when let's say there's not as much supply to be had, your relationship might allow you to get the goods that you need, the supplies that you need from your suppliers when there aren't enough to go around. Or when we think about sourcing, let's say, and thinking about a supply chain, when you're thinking about, let's say, farmers and helping them to take care of their land and education and helping them have more sustainable farming means that you get better quality product and better quality, and more, I guess, more guarantee or more in what you're able to get from your supply chain. So I think that this is often the way that companies that don't consider themselves social come into the social sphere. And by really making it a part of the strategies, I think it's really key, but I'll let my colleagues jump in.
You've done an amazing job, Allison. I love it.
Yeah, I would just say we are seeing a lot of, again, like social entrepreneurship activity in this space, which is really exciting. So one of the winners of our new venture competition a couple of years ago, I'll just shout out Shelly Zhu Design, is a student who is a fashion retailer, and her goal is to make clothing with minimal waste, right? So literally, like, the design of the clothing is to minimize the waste. She also is very intentional in how she puts together her supply chain. Her workforce is primarily made up of refugee women. So she's like thinking about it from A to Z. And for her, this comes from a very proximate place. She grew up in China, essentially over a waste dump, and saw the impact of, how we're operating retail now and how that's not sustainable. And we're just seeing a lot of really interesting solutions. One of the solutions we saw in this year's new venture competition was around hemp, right, as a sustainable a source of the supply chain. So there's a lot of really creative solutions that I'm seeing coming out of our social entrepreneurs that I think will only add to social impact in this space.
Cosine, I'm seeing
one quick thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Go for it. Go for it, Allison.
One quick thing I use to frame that seems to resonate with students when they're like, oh, I get it, is I have a couple colleagues from when I was in business school who went to, let's say, a beverage company as an example. And so when we think about this whole idea, we've been talking about value creation over time and long-term sustainability of a business, not sustainability necessarily the environment, but sustainability of a business. Let's think about a beverage company and how they're increasingly focusing on water in their supply chain and how they can be responsible with their water usage in their supply chain. Because at the end of the day, however many years from now you want to look out, what's the share price of a beverage company that can't get water? And so, what's the bottom line? Revenue might be great, but what are your cost of goods sold as the cost of water goes up? So that's kind of the way I try to frame it, and that gets a little bit of an aha moment.
Next question. I can't follow that, Chad.
Well, unfortunately, we've used up all our time. We could absolutely continue this conversation for quite a while, but we're already up at the hour, and just want to thank everyone for joining us, and especially giving a special thanks to each of our panelists. It's not just the students who have a lot of demands for their time, but obviously you all do as well. And so grateful for taking the time to have this conversation with all of us. The video from this webinar and any of the other materials will be shared via our email and social media as well. So those of you who want to come back will have a chance to revisit any of this. And we hope that you join us for the future virtual convenings from the Sorenson Impact Institute.